for an elderly couple. When I say elderly, they were well into their late 70s, if not 80. And during mediation, they got into a physical altercation. So these were two almost 80-year-olds who got into a physical altercation during their divorce, which, I mean, there's just a lot of questions about that.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where, as always, we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of legal fields and jurisdictions because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Max Emmer, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Emmer Law, PLC. Max, how you doing this morning?
Hi, Justin. Good. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. My pleasure as well. Before we get started, as always, we're going to jump over and take a look at Max's site. So Max runs Emmer Law. It is a seemingly full service family law center up in or around Detroit in Michigan. And we're going to kind of dive into what he does. Very personable guy. We had a big long pre-roll actually, just kind of talking and joking around. So I'm really kind of excited to dive in and see what he does. But as always, we will have links to his information down below. That is Emmer Law PLC. You can also call him at 248-859-0015. And again, links as always in the description below. Before we get started, as always, we're going to read from our sponsors. And our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels. Entrepreneurs and dream chasers, listen up. Running an online business doesn't have to mean drowning in subscriptions or wrestling with a messy tech stack. Groove is rolling out a jaw-dropping limited time offer. You can now run your entire operation. Think stunning websites, Groove pages, high converting sales funnels, email campaigns, webinars, e-commerce stores, affiliate programs, all of that completely free for an entire year, no credit card required up front. That's right, over 1 million users are already saving thousands and scaling their businesses smarter with this all-in-one platform that replaces ClickFunnels, Shopify, and a whole host of other platforms. There's no risk, there's no hidden fees, just pure, powerful growth tools that help you focus on what matters, building your empire. But hurry, this deal will not last forever. Jump in now by visiting theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up today for free for, again, an entire year. And again, if you can't make it profitable after a year, then don't pay anything. You never pay anything. But if you can jump in, get started, and make it profitable, then you're ahead of the game. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove, Groove, theattorneypost.com/groove for an all-in-one system that basically replaces everything that you are doing. I'm very impressed by the platform. I've used the platform and I strongly endorse it. So again, that's theattorneypost.com/groove. Our second sponsor of the day is Habanero Social. What if Google could send you free clients every single month? With Habanero Social, it's not a fantasy, it's a reality. Habanero Social is an AI-powered platform that optimizes your Google business profile to attract more local customers effortlessly. From cranking out high-quality content to managing reviews and fine-tuning your local SEO, Habanero Social handles it all while you sit back and watch your business grow. 85% of local searches happen in the Google Maps pack. You need to be showing up there if you're going to get those clients. An optimized Google business profile doesn't just show up, but it engages. It builds trust, it increases clicks, and ultimately boosts your business. And they're so confident that it works, they offer a 3 times ROI guarantee. If you don't make at least 3 times more than you spend with them, they'll refund your money or work for free to make it right. Stop wasting time on old school tactics. Visit habanerosocial.com and automate everything you need to rank higher, engage better, and drive more clients to your business or firm. Ready to get more clients without lifting a finger? Visit habanerosocial.com now and let AI do all the heavy lifting completely risk-free. All right, so again, I am joined with Max. Let me pull up my notes here. Max is a proud Metro Detroit native. He's built his career rooted in both expertise and community connection. His early legal practice in securities litigation, representing high-profile financial institutions and regional banks, provided a strong foundation before he pivoted to family law. With a unique blend of corporate negotiation skills and a genuine sensitivity to family matters, Max is committed to guiding clients through life's most challenging transitions. He is particularly skilled in collaborative divorce, striving for peaceful and cost-effective resolutions. And when he's not working, Max enjoys playing tennis, traveling, and spending time with his family, including his son Rocky and his adopted dog Hudson. Now, I could talk a whole lot more about you, but I'd never be able to scratch the surface. So my first question to you, Max, is just this. What did I miss? Tell me about you. Who are you? What makes you you?
Well, thanks, Justin. And I have to say, the whole time you've been talking, I'm very jealous of your voice. You've got that just tremendous voice.
Got
But what I
a
can
voice
tell
and
you,
a face for radio, right?
you're right. Well, we all, most of us do. But I would say about me, I am a lifelong Detroiter, but I went to college at Boston University. I went to law school at the University in Florida, University of Miami in Florida, go U. I've had a very circuitous career route. I am a diehard Detroit Lions fan, so I tell people do not judge my intellect
I'm
or
so
my
sorry.
competence on that, although we're having a good few years now. Um, but I'm an avid traveler. I just got back from Alaska. I believe the ability to travel is one of the greatest, kind of privileges in the world. And now that I work for myself and kind of have my own firm, I'm really trying to, one, take advantage of being as involved and their parent and father as I can, and two, traveling the world while running a business. And I've been very fortunate to be doing that for 4 years now. And when I just thought that I've been a lawyer for 13 years, that made me feel old for one of the first times in a long time. But I am, as my wife would say, I am a very gregarious and outgoing personality, if not annoying at times. And I pride myself on being unabashedly authentic. And as my clients and friends and family say, I am who I am. And most people like that. And I am unapologetically myself.
That's awesome. Absolutely. Well, tell me this. If I didn't know anything about you, obviously I've done a little bit of research. I looked at your site. I wrote a little, bio about you, et cetera. But if I didn't know anything about you and your firm, and maybe we had 30 seconds in an elevator, so give me your pitch for your firm. What do you do specifically? What sets you apart? Why do people find you and why do they choose to work with your firm?
I think that's a great question. So I tell people I'm different from most every other family lawyer. I am the family lawyer who tells you most often not to fight. I am the family lawyer who tells you that the court is not the best place for you and your kids. And I am very much amicably and resolution focused, trying to help people curate processes and frameworks to help them through the family law and divorce process to get to their next healthier, happier chapter. Most family lawyers view family law as a war. I always say I can be a warrior. I have all those tools and weapons. If there's a chance where they're really needed, such as a complicated custody dispute or someone is hiding money, I agree there's absolutely a time and a place for litigious and contested divorce matters. But I firmly believe in if I can be of assistance in keeping a matter settlement focused in an amicable and collaborative fashion, that best serves my client, their children, and the collective family as a whole. And I believe that is my duty as an advisor and counselor. Again, I think many family lawyers think differently. That's not me saying I'm better than them, but I would say the difference in me is I practice family law and run my law firm differently virtually than most other family lawyers.
Gotcha. Oh, that makes sense. So, I guess the next question is just very simply, what got you into law? Were you, one of those kids that always knew you wanted to be a lawyer when you grew up? Did you grow up on Perry Mason or,
How old do you think I am? I'm a veteran now. No, I'm
I
just
mean,
teasing.
so I'm older than you technically, because I know how old you are. I was kind of surprised. I'm usually the younger one on these interviews, but
Yeah,
I'm
no,
40.
I
But did you always know you wanted to be an attorney, or what got you into it? Was this like a midlife crisis, and you're like, I just, I want to do something else
so
instead, or
look, I always was attracted, one of my favorite movies is A Few Good Men. I loved it as a kid. I loved it as I got older. Um, if I say it honestly, I feel like I grew up in a family and a community where you're either a doctor or a lawyer. I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor. I was loquacious and I guess outgoing and communicative, so law seemed to fit. So no, I think I was doing it by default, but as I said, I've had a very circuitous career. I've worked in a number of different firms. I've left law. I've returned to law. I've worked in different practice areas. I've now had my own firm for 4 years. And I think the thing I've learned and the thing I really like about both family law and what I do and how I do it is that one, I'm able to work on my own terms, which works great for my personality. But two, I really do feel that I am giving people creative, thoughtful, and customized advice and counsel to truly help them during the hardest point of their life. Aside from, death, divorce is considered the most trying point of people's life. And I really do take it as a humbling and solemn duty that people come to me seeking advice and help during that time. And the other thing I would say is I always say I'm just as much unlicensed therapist as I am lawyer. And I really like the kind of therapizing and kind of just the general life and advice and direction on everything because divorce affects every aspect and every facet of your life. And I really like helping people, especially when they feel emotionally paralyzed. I really take that as an honor and a privilege when they're like, Max, like you got to be my shepherd, you got to be my partner, get me through this to the other side. And that is something I do really love about family law because my impact is so great and so personal.
Gotcha. No, it makes perfect sense. Um, no, I like that. That's a good answer. So
Thank you.
we just got through 5 years ago, knock on wood, and it'll never happen again with a pandemic. And one thing I found is the pandemic really affected a lot of people in very different ways. Some places, I've talked to attorneys in California and New York that were really locked down. I've talked to attorneys in Texas and Florida that were not so locked down, or even some places in Texas like Austin that were still very locked down. And a lot of people had very different approaches to the pandemic, to how it affected their law firm, how it affected the way they interfaced with their clients, how they interfaced with the courts. What was your experience of the pandemic? How did it affect your practice, and even help you start your practice?
Yeah.
And you tell me about your experience with the pandemic up there in Detroit.
So, I mean, that's a great question. I could probably spend 45 minutes on that. But during the pandemic, I was going through a major career transition and I had joined a small family law firm where I was kind of learning the ropes of family law. Um, COVID hit about 4 weeks into that job, and we went from in-person court to Zoom court, and we went from work from home to work in office. And so I was basically in a new job, learning a new skill set and profession during COVID. And ironically, my wife and I also got pregnant during COVID. So there was a confluence of events. I realized after a number of jobs that me working at a law firm, working big law hours, making small law firm money did not work for me. It was a square peg in a round hole. I knew I had the personality and the entrepreneurial spirit to do my own thing. Some inter-office drama that isn't directly relevant here occurred to the point where I made the decision that I'm going to launch my own law firm during the pandemic while my wife is pregnant. And over a period of months, um, I designed a website. I kind of got things queued up in the background. I have an amazing network. I have wonderful mentors and people who I've just worked with and connected with over the years. And in the summer of 2021, when my wife was 8 months pregnant, I launched my law firm. I did not have one client. I did not spend $1 on marketing. I sent an email to about 400 people who are in my network. I said, this is my law firm. This is what I do. This is how I do it. I'm going to do things differently. And if you have anyone, and I got a client my third day, and I do not besmirch anyone who markets or advertises, but I'm proud to say that I built a six-figure law firm from zero and maybe spending $100 on marketing in less than a year. And I'm 4 years into that journey now. So I think for me, one, COVID changed the way the practice of law forever. I don't think I could practice law in the traditional sense because I run in effect, virtual law firm. Many of my clients never want to meet in person, which I find sort of wild, but I go to court by Zoom. I can do Zoom hearings from wherever I'm traveling. And so, one, I think COVID made me have a lot of self-actualization about my life and career, but two, COVID kind of served as a jumping off point for me to build my firm and business in a way that would not have been possible before the year 2020.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. And yeah, I will say, COVID is one of the reasons we relaunched the podcast. This podcast is over a decade old. We were doing this back in the
Wow.
early
You were a
2010s.
trendsetter.
But we lost the whole channel because with Google sometimes there's no
Yeah.
appeals, and somebody was duplicating our content, but they took our channel down, and I just kind of gave up on it. And then COVID hit, and one of the issues was always having to like walk people through. Well, this is Zoom, and you've got to download it, and people are like, I don't
Hey,
want to download
people,
this.
5 years later, people still don't know how to use Zoom. And when I'm in Zoom court, the judges, rightfully so, get very frustrated. They're like, "How do you not know how to use Zoom? We're 5 years in. It was one thing 2 weeks in, or even a
Yeah.
couple months, but we're now half a decade in."
I'm sure you saw that famous clip of there was an attorney that had like the cat
The
filter on or
cat,
whatever. He's
yes,
like,
the cat
I
filter,
promise,
yes,
Your
that
Honor, I'm
was.
not a cat.
Yeah, no, I
But he
mean
didn't want it turned off.
that was that was awesome in a sense that I feel bad, but yeah, I mean it's just I talk to lawyers who've practiced 30, 40, 50 years, and I mean they could have never imagined this. I mean 10 years ago when I was a young lawyer, I could have never imagined this. And
Yeah.
for me it's been mostly wonderful, but I know there's been challenges for other people.
No, 100%. So you've been in your law practice for just a few years now, your family law practice, but you've been doing law for quite some time off and on.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I know that you go up to bat a number of times and nobody bats 1,000 eventually. You're going to strike out here or there. I am sure, Max, that you've had some setbacks or some failures in your practice of law, whether it was, earlier on or even in your current practice. But I'm a firm believer that failure is only failure if you don't learn from it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a slow burn win. So can you tell my listeners about a time in your practice of law where you failed? But what did you learn from it and how do you carry that forward to always make sure you're giving the best care to your clients?
Yes, everyone fails, everyone makes mistakes. I honestly probably have too many to list, but I think that's just because I'm honest and we all do. Um, Example I have from my very first job, I did securities litigation arbitration, which was primarily arbitration based, which wasn't in the court system, and it had its own rules. And occasionally we would have a court matter, and I was handling one of the rare court matters. I was a new lawyer, and it was my first time in court, and we had to file something, a benign filing. It was not some statute of limitations or anything that was very dramatic, but I was unfamiliar with the court rules on the filing and mailing requirements of that, and I blew a deadline. And was it irreparable? No. Was our client prejudiced? No. Everything was okay. But was it embarrassing? Yes. Was my boss upset? Yes. And the thing that taught me was just that as a lawyer, just you've got to be a master of details. Everyone makes mistakes, and another instance I had that I would say is more a professional mistake than a kind of legal mistake is um, I was unhappy in a job once to the point where I just kind of took the first thing that came up, and I went from a job that was sort of not a fit, and I joined somewhere that was even more not a fit. And I learned that lesson, and that probably wasn't great for me. It probably wasn't great for them. And as I said, I've made a lot of moves in my career. I've had a career out that I never expected. It's part of the reason why I speak at a lot of high schools and colleges and law schools. I'm very invested in giving people career advice and just talking to them because I've done all sorts of things and I've come to law and left law and never thought I would return. And one thing I always say is that I grew up in a community where I expected my life and career to just be linear, up, 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 up forever. And mine has been this. And I tell people, if you are one of these rare people who it is all this, that's great. And I wish you the best of luck, even though there's probably lessons you're not learning. But most of us are going to have trials and turbulations and, tumult. And so I think for me, it's just a realization that things would be rockier than I anticipated. But those rocky times, I think, ultimately did, one, give me a lot of really beneficial life and professional experience, and two, put me somewhere where I am at the most successful part of my career.
Gotcha. Oh, it makes sense. And everyone rolls with the punches. And again, every time you lose a little bit, every time you fail a little bit, you learn from it, you move forward, and things go on. The flip side of that coin, though, is success. I am sure you've had some great successes. You couldn't be in business if you weren't having
Yeah.
successes. You couldn't still be a practicing firm if you weren't. So, if I can ask this, what's one or two of the things in your legal career, Max, that you're most proud of? The proverbial feathers in your cap, so to speak, that you're just, "God, I can't believe it worked out that well," or "Man, that client was in a really bad position and things just
Yeah.
got so much better." Whatever it happens to be.
So I would say and I've practiced in a lot of different areas of law, and I always said, look, I got a lot of good results for my corporate clients when I did, but um, Do you necessarily feel prideful about saving a bank a certain amount of dollars compared to an individual? I don't know. I can tell you without getting into too many details. I handled a very unique adoption once, and adoption's not a major part of my practice, but I do it now and again. And there were a lot of heartbreaking and devastating and really upsetting circumstances with it. And a couple came to me and they were just like, even if you're not an adoption expert, we just really respect your style, your approach, your tenacity, your truthfulness, and your creativity. And it was an 11-month process. And I always say, while it was not one of the most financially rewarding engagements of my career in terms of just legal and personal and emotional and spiritual, helping this couple really save this ill child from precarious circumstances, bring this child into this country, into this community, into their loving home, and get him the medical and educational and just the human love, care, and attention they needed, and helping them to navigate that every step of the way was tremendously gratifying. And do I think I'm going to make adoption a major part of my practice? No. It really was an honor and a privilege of my career to really help people create a family and do so in a legally mindful, but also sort of a personal and tender manner as well.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. It's funny because it's almost the opposite of, custody.
Yes, it's the opposite of what I joke. It is the usually I'm helping families transition out of being traditional families, and it was the rare privilege to do that. And I think, look, I think adoption is such a wonderful thing, and I think many people struggle to have children, many people struggle to create families, and if there are people who want to love and support and raise a child and bring them into their home, and they have the resources both personally, financially, and just generally to do so. If I could play a small part in that, it was a tremendous privilege to do so.
Awesome. Awesome. So, not really the flip side, almost the side of the coin.
Yeah.
Successes and failures are just absurdities. And I find that attorneys usually encounter some of the most fascinating absurdities because you're, especially in certain facets, criminal law,
Yes.
personal injury, and family law, you're hitting people sometimes at their worst moments, but you're also hitting them in very unique situations. So if I can ask this in a way that is as um, what is the word I want to use here? Not abrasive or offensive. What's one of the
Yes.
most or a couple of the most absurd things you've encountered? And it could be a client and a demand that they
Yeah.
had. It could be a court and a thing that a judge said or the other side was arguing or whatever it happens to be. But what's a couple of the most absurd
So
things you
I can definitely answer that, and with of course respecting confidentiality and discretion. Um, two things come to mind. The first thing, on my website, I have a video that says "Don't fight over pots and pans," and it sounds ridiculous, but I've seen it a lot. And I had a mediation once where we were fighting about everything to the point where we were literally fighting about a used George Foreman grill. And I said, guys, we're spending 1,000 an hour to fight over something that's maybe worth $20. So I think there's that level of pettiness. And one thing I always tell my clients is I'm not judging you for it, but I think I would be doing you a tremendous disservice if I was kind of playing into that. And there are a lot of family lawyers who are like, let's fight over the pots and pans. And I just think it's nonsense. The other time I had, which was pretty crazy and absurd, and I will give limited personal details, but I was handling a divorce for an elderly couple. When I say elderly, they were well into their late 70s, if not 80. And during mediation, they got into a physical altercation. So these were two almost 80-year-olds who got into a physical altercation during their divorce, which, I mean, there's just a lot of questions about that. And um, yeah, I really questioned a lot of things about life, the world, my life, my job, and that's not to diminish what these people or anyone feels during their process, but I think when you're seeing, true grandparents physically assaulting one another, I think you have more questions than answers.
Can I ask? I don't know if you can share this or not. Was this like a second, third, fourth marriage? Had they been
It
married
was
for
a
60?
first marriage. No, it was first marriage, married for over 50 years. And I when I think about the case or cases like it, people always think if you get to that age, how and why. And one more general observation I would make is I think 20, 30, 40 years ago, whether it was life expectancy or just social stigma, people just wrote it out. And I think now people are like, at that point, it's not like I don't think you have decades of good years left, but I think people are at a life station now where they're like, I can move on, I'm going to move on. And whether I have 30 good years or 3 good years, if I don't want to be with someone or I'm unhappy, I think people are a lot more willing to take that step than they ever were previously. So I think people are kind of saying screw it more than they would have in the past. And I'm not here to be a moral arbiter of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do think people, and I think COVID was a large part of this, I think people think life is very precious and life has a lot going on. And if you're not happy, I think people aren't as I think people aren't as hesitant as they used to be.
Yeah. I've heard multiple family law attorneys actually talk about COVID and say some of them said that they think that a lot of people, you had a spike in divorces and things because people just were cramped together much longer, spending, a lot more time stuck in close quarters, and that led to a spike. I've heard other people say they didn't actually experience that. In your experience, I know you're starting your family law practice at that time, but you still probably have at the very least anecdotal data. But what's your take on that?
So I would say that one of my very good friends is an OBGYN, and there was kind of a joke in our friend circle that one of us was going to have a boom. Either there was going to be a baby boom or a divorce boom. And I thought it was, and despite me having a COVID baby, I absolutely think there was a divorce boom. And I don't say that glibly or, uh, lightly. I think working at my former firm, starting my firm, um, I do think there was an increase in divorce and family law matters, if for no other reason that one, I think when you are out of the house 40 plus hours a week and now you're together the entire week, I think that's a big shift. And I think COVID really made people have a existential and philosophical inventory and questioning of their life and what they want in their future. And I just think that people were like, if I'm not happy and the world can shut down and everyone could die or we could be stuck at home forever, I think people took a real moral and logistical life inventory of where they were. And I think people said, and one thing I would also say too is many of my cases, people don't come in saying that they hate each other or I want blood or I want to kill them. It's just I'm not in love anymore, or we're not happy, or we've grown apart, or I don't want to do this for 30 more years. And I think COVID was a major catalyst for that. I think COVID might have been the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people. And I think it was this once in a century event that kind of shook the conscience of the world and of someone's kind of mind and their feelings about their life. So I thought there was a significant increase in divorces with COVID. And I think a big reason for that was that kind of change in world and life and society.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Here's a very, very, very important question, and you may have already answered a little bit because you did mention a few good men. But who's your favorite attorney in pop culture?
Oh man, that's so hard. Like I'm rarely I'm rare I'm well while I think about that, I'm gonna tell you. So I just watched Suits for the first time, and while I found it very entertaining, I just thought it was kind of ridiculous because like they would get a case and they're like, we're going to trial this afternoon. It's like 99% of cases don't go to trial. But my favorite lawyer, God, that is so hard. I'm thinking back to all the great, you know, I loved Matthew McConaughey in A Time to Kill. I think To Kill a Mockingbird is a bit cliche, but there's a reason it's a cliche. Um, I love Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men, and you know, I gotta say, and I know this is more humorous. I mean, I love me some Joe Pesci and My Cousin Vinny. I mean, that is just a masterpiece of. how people think the legal world works and then how it actually works. Because the one thing I always tell people is I think when you look on TV or movies, you think of courts and the legal system as this beacon of intelligence and the height of, superiority. And courtrooms are very much more like My Cousin Vinny than they are these esoteric beacons of humanity. And, a courtroom can be messy and it can be funny and it can be sad and it can be wild. So I tend to like the movies and TV shows that demonstrate that more so than just this idealized version of the justice and court system.
Totally fair. Totally fair. I think My Cousin Vinny is actually the number one, when I ask that question, the number one attorney people cite. They're
It's
like,
amazing. It is just, I mean, two Utes, and I mean, when he walks into the jail and he doesn't know what he's doing, and it's just wonderful. And then when he starts to get the hang of it, you're rooting for him, and then he starts kicking ass. And the judge is amazing. He that is just really a tremendous character, and yeah, I think that is just if not representative, I think it is a wonderfully creative and thoughtful view of our world and profession.
very nice, very nice. So let's talk a little bit more about your practice and what you do. And I think the first question I want to ask you is just, I'm sure people come to you with all sorts of thoughts, all sorts of expectations about what you can do, what you can't do, what you will do, what you won't do, etc. What are some of the biggest misconceptions people bring into your office? Maybe the things that they think you can do that you just like, I can't do that. Or, if you could disabuse people of one particular misconception, what would
I,
that be?
I think what I do is I tell people that I often try to come into their divorce as a calming influence and not a pit bull. I tell people that I believe they will be best served with me giving them individualized, thoughtful advice and counsel on best next steps to move forward through the process. I don't think fire and brimstone is typically nor most of the time helpful nor beneficial. So, one thing I really try to do, and again, unless, look, if there are allegations of child abuse or domestic violence or someone is hiding money, litigious cases and highly contentious matters have their time and place, and the courts are at their disposal, absolutely. But I really try to be a calming influence, and I really try to help people look at it as a strategic chessboard and really say, how are we going to move through this process? Let's identify our priorities, let's identify our concerns and anxieties, and let's really make a game plan to go from A to Z, not just enter this nuclear divorce trench warfare, which serves no one but the lawyers who just make a lot of money. In terms of what I tell people about what's realistic and what isn't, I think I'm way more realistic than most lawyers, much to my clients, I think, initial chagrin. Um, I had a client come in recently who told me that they wanted to have 13 out of 14 parenting nights a week, every 2 weeks. We do parenting time in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And I asked them a question. I go, is your co-parent a good parent? And they go, they're a wonderful parent. And I go, are they an involved parent? They go, very. And I go, then why are you going to have 13 out of 14 overnights? And they said, that's because that's what I want. And that's what I should get. And I was like, yeah, that's not how it works. And I'm not getting you that. I'm a lot more unvarnished than most lawyers. So I think a really helpful tool I use for clients is for most of the time in family law, and I'm making a physical illustration here with my hands if you cannot see, but family law in 2025 is 50-50 or 49-51 or 48-52. It's not this 80-20. It's not this. And I think a lot of people have preconceived notions on both sides of the aisle with respect to men and women, fathers, mothers. And I think the days of, and I think a lot of people have this, idea that it's still the 70s or 80s where it's basically mom gets all the parenting time, dad pays for everything, and that's how it is. That's not how family law works in 2025. And if I have a client coming in who expects that, I'm very quick to disabuse them of that misconception.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. You mentioned, in your ideal situation when there's not like child abuse, what happens if there is? Like, have you ever had to represent a client that's accused of child abuse? And in
I,
those situations?
I have. So I've represented all sides. I would always say my practice is not on the terribly contentious side. That being said, I do tend to have a contentious matter, going at, every time. Um, in situations where there are serious allegations or accusations, what I do is twofold. One, I really strive to both make the other side or my side fully comfortable about uncomfortable things, but at the same time, endeavoring into a true fact-finding mission so that all parties, all accusations are dealt with seriously, but also fairly. And look, if I have a client accused of something, I'm not going to automatically let them be bulldozed. And if I have a client who's accused of something, other thing, I'm going to vigorously look into it and advocate for them. And I really do try to be measured and level-headed, whatever side I'm on, because the side switches every day. Um, I'm also aware that there's three sides to every story. There's often one party side, the other party side, and there's something in the middle. So I really try to, while listening to my client and zealously advocating for them, I also do keep in mind that there's more than one position and more than one side. And I really do try to have a cumulative and 30,000 foot view of every situation and circumstance so I can give the best advice possible.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Um, that triggered another thought and I just lost it. Shoot. Um, I was going to ask you what you just said. And I looked at my notes
Okay,
and
I talk a lot. I talk a lot.
derailed. No, no, I had a question I wanted to ask you. Oh, it's around the tip of my tongue too. If it'll come back in a minute, we'll ask for it.
Sure, go ahead.
Let me ask you this instead then, while I'm trying to repercolate. Now, you do divorce, obviously, but you also do collaborative divorce. What's the difference and why would somebody choose one over the other?
So it's a great question. So one thing I tell my clients is that if someone wants to work with me for their divorce, I will help curate a process and a framework that works for them. What does that mean? Most people, when they think of divorce, they think of TVs and movies. They think, I file, I have the other party serve while they're at my kid's basketball game. It creates this huge controversy. We're in court for a year. We're doing depositions. We're mediating. We're fighting. We're doing motions. And at the end, we settle it for something that neither side is happy with. Um, I believe there's more than one way to get divorced. In fact, I know there is. I help people get divorced really in three distinct ways. One is what I call traditional litigation, which is you file in court, you go through the court process that. I also do a lot of what I call one lawyer divorce. And one lawyer divorce doesn't mean I can represent two people because I can't. But let's say, for instance, let's say John and Jane agree on 98% of the issues and they have a few minor questions and they just want to move forward. A lot of times, one of them or both of them come to me and they're like, hey, we don't think we need two lawyers. We agree on everything. We basically just want help with paperwork. We want to have the process facilitated for us. And what I say is, I cannot ethically represent both of you. However, one of you can retain me. I will work on behalf of the agreements you've reached. I will make sure the unrepresented party knows they have a right to counsel, signs a waiver to that effect, and I will remind them periodically that they have a right to consult with someone. Usually they don't want to because they're comfortable, and then I help them move through the process. And then collaborative divorce is kind of its own system. And basically, you have to be a certified collaborative professional, which I am. I'm a certified mediator and I'm a certified collaborative attorney. And that is for people who say, we're getting divorced, but we really want to keep things private. We really want to keep things, even keeled, and we really want to keep things moving forward on our own term. And in that case, both parties hire a collaboratively trained divorce attorney, and then we build them a team based on what they need. For instance, if they have a lot of disagreements on parenting, we'll bring in a family therapist who's a co-parenting counselor. If they have a complicated financial state, we will bring in a certified divorce financial analyst. And we are basically in collaborative divorce. We are doing your divorce in private and we're doing it creatively and we are doing it in reverse, which means we are solving your divorce in private and we are only filing once we have an agreement. And then you're able to opt out of front of the court. You're not going to spend 13 months in court. You're not going to have everything in the public record. So it is a system and a framework where if people know they're getting divorced, but they'd really like to keep it private and they'd really like to keep it focused on the best interests of their children and their family. It is a really customizable and individualized process that we can curate on a person by person and family by family basis.
Gotcha.
And
I think the question.
I would say, oh, go ahead, please.
No, no, please, please, you continue because I was going to jump.
The only thing I was going to say is if I had to break my practice down, I would say about a third of my practice is collaborative divorce cases. I would say about a third of my practice is one lawyer cases or mediation. And then I would say the other third is traditional litigation. That being said, a lot of my litigation cases are fairly amicable. They're just proceeding through the court process. And that's kind of how I would break down my practice.
Gotcha. When you represent your clients, this is purely a statistical question. Do you tend to represent more husbands, more wives? Is it a split?
So it's a great question. So I do not cut myself off to one segment of the market or the other. I would say year over year, and I have 4 years of data on my own now. Um, I seem to switch year over year. I would say 2 years ago, I was 60-40 women to men. Last year, I would say I was maybe 65-35 men to women. Um, I handle all sorts. I do a number of same-sex divorces and prenuptial agreements things too. I work with all sorts of people. I work with everyone across the socioeconomic strata. Um, and really, it's just tends to be a cyclical thing. I wouldn't say I work with one over the other, but I think some quarters or months or years, I tend to be a little more the other way than the other. But for the most part, I'm pretty evenly balanced between men and women and mothers, fathers, and co-parents.
Gotcha. Here's a question actually that somebody asked me a while back, and I was always kind of pondering this myself. You mentioned you do same-sex divorce. Um, does that ever produce any unique situations that aren't found in a normal divorce, or is it basically the same thing? It just happened to be same sex. I mean, one of the big differences would be the natural generation of children versus perhaps the adoption of children or something like that. But are there any really unique facets of same-sex divorce law?
So honestly, I've handled 5 or 6 same-sex divorces. I've done several same-sex prenuptial agreements, and I had that question when I first started. And really, there really is no difference. Generally, instead of mother and father, we just refer to party A or party B or parent one or parent two. Other than that, the law is very much the same. I think maybe some interpersonal or some legal adjacent issues could come up, but from the nuts and bolts from the divorce, it's really just nomenclature and it's really just the vernacular you use. There isn't really any substantive difference about how the case will go or how the case will be decided or resolved.
Kind of what I
But that is
figured.
a really good question.
You're playing in the law, and the law is the law. So if
It's
it's not,
just, but I will say, I do have lawyers who are in their 60s and 70s who they're not used to it, and that doesn't mean they're not for it. There's adjustment, but I do think aside from some basic, again, terminology or kind of day-to-day logistics in terms of pleadings and kind of drafting, there's really no legal difference.
gotcha. That makes sense. Um, have you ever had a couple reconcile while
Yes,
going
I
through?
have. I have had that a number of times. In fact, I once had a couple have I'm going to say a 10-month divorce. Amicable but very involved, mediated, detailed discovery. We worked on a settlement proposal, and I remember my client called me, and was like, "We're going to give it another shot." And they go, "Do we have to do anything?" I go, "I mean, you're not getting your money back, but other than that, we'll dismiss the divorce and God bless." I've also had clients who've divorced and gotten remarried. I also recently, um, I did a prenuptial agreement for a couple who got divorced and they wanted to get remarried, but the condition for getting remarried is my client would only get remarried if they had a prenup. So I've done that. Am I going to say it's common? No, but does it happen? Yes, it sure happens.
Um, so we live in an evolving landscape. We were talking about this in the pre-roll, even with things like AI and whatnot. one of the things I'm very aware of, but I'm kind of curious your take on is social media. Obviously, everyone is on social media. We all have the little magical square that fits in our back pocket. People are always on the Instagrams and the TikToks and YouTubes and all the things. What role is social media playing in family law in general? And what advice would you give to people looking at, any aspect of family law and as it relates to social media?
So I think interesting. I have one legal anecdote that I think social media has kind of changed the landscape on for family law. I do a lot of prenuptial agreements in my practice. I think prenups have become way more ubiquitous and common with social media, with the celebrity culture, with TMZ. Um, I think the amount and types of people seeking prenups now compared to 10 years ago has increased tenfold. And that's not me saying they don't need them or they don't deserve them. But I think when you're seeing in the culture and the lexicon, prenups, they're way more common. I did 16 prenups last year, and I'm a solo lawyer who does not advertise. I think that's quite a lot. And I did prenups for people who are very wealthy. I did prenups for people young in their careers, and I did them just for people who just wanted one. So I think social media has had a big effect on things like that. In terms of, I make videos, I make vignettes, and one thing for me, um, my clients and the people who refer to me, I think they like that I'm real. And you mentioned it. I did a video once on Broadway, and I did a video in front of a Monet once in a museum, and I said something to the effect of, "Let's not fight over, your $80 painting, but if you've got one of these, we're gonna fight about it." And I think I'm not trying to minimize the seriousness, or I'm not trying to make light of a very serious, important situation, but I do believe a little levity and humanity goes a long way. And one thing I always say is that, I'm not a tax attorney. I'm not a real estate attorney. A family lawyer is a very personal, intimate hire. And yes, you should expect expertise and experience and competency. You also want someone who will listen to you. You also want someone you will be comfortable with. I always say, you are talking money, kids, sex, you name it with this person. You want it to be someone you're comfortable with, who listens to you and who makes you feel heard. And that is the advice I always give. I tell people, talk to more than one lawyer. Do not feel bad if you are shopping around on me. And I always tell people, look, this is a major decision, and I don't have the arrogance to tell you who you should hire or what you should do. A lot of the people who come to me, especially because I don't mass advertise, they're being sent to me because either they or someone they know thinks I will be a good fit for them. But find someone who you feel comfortable with. Find someone who you do not feel like you're just another file and another legal ATM to. And find someone who's going to listen to you and help you make a plan. Now, does that mean you're going to love everything they do and love all the advice they give you? No. But they're never going to make you feel dismissed, and they're never going to make you feel like you and your family and your case don't matter.
Gotcha. No, it makes perfect sense. Um, Let me ask about money, because obviously that's a big issue.
Yeah, sure.
Um, what happens if someone needs an attorney but they can't afford you? So, maybe it's the mother is a stay-at-home mom, and all of a sudden she's in a divorce and she wants to, have her rights protected. What happens in those situations? Because that's a
So,
question people all
so
the time.
that's a really good question. And I would say there's two different components of that. There's the people who may not have direct access to money but have the money for it, and then there's people who just don't have the money. Um, if someone calls me and says, "Look, I have $0. We have no money," I will give them advice, direction. I can't really help them. There are resources like in Michigan, we have like the Great Lake Legal Fund Society, and we have legal aid, which will help people who don't qualify based on income and things like that. But look, I always say this, I can't work for free. There's no lawyer who doesn't take a retainer. That being said, um, I've had clients who their spouses might make a lot of money, but they don't want to put it on the credit card because they don't want to arouse suspicion, or they might not have access to a credit card. And in that situation, usually they'll talk to family or friends, or they will figure out a way. Or sometimes I will take a smaller retainer. Um, I will not work without a retainer just because I am running a business as much as I like to help people. But I would say for the people who have no money, there are free and pro bono resources. Um, for the people who there is money, but they're worried about it or having access to it, the other thing I will say is everyone has a right to use marital funds and marital assets for legal counsel in a divorce. So I have had cases where someone might say, "Hey, my spouse makes 250 grand a year, but I literally only have access to a couple grand, or my credit card has a 4 grand limit." Then what we'll do is we'll take a retainer, and then when we file, we'll say to their spouse, "You either need to give us access to marital funds, you need to send us funds, or we're going to file a motion for access to funds for attorney fees and costs." So there are ways to do it. And I do try to be sensitive and mindful of that. But, I also am running a business and, I tread lightly on wanting to help everyone, but also being realistic about my capacity as well.
That's totally fair. I mean, again, as you said, you run a business and you can't work for free. If you work for free, you would not be,
No, I don't think my wife and kid nor myself would be very happy with me if I worked for free.
As far as things like child support and spousal support go, what is the Michigan child support formula? How does it work? How do you help clients navigate its impact on their
Great
financial?
question. And those are two completely different things. So in Michigan, as in most states, we have a child support formula. And in Michigan, there are about 14 data points that we input into a formula and it spits out a number. The two most heavily weighted or the two most significant factors in child support are income of the parties and overnights of the parties. So, for example, if two parents make similar money and they have equal overnights, there's going to be little to no child support. But let's say parent A makes 200 grand, parent B makes 60 grand, and parent B has more overnights. That's going to be more significant child support because they have more overnights and they make way less money. Child support in Michigan is formulaic. Spousal support is different in that there's no statutory formula. Do I have an internal calculator that I can plug numbers into to come up with a guess? Yes. But courts do not have a calculator for spousal support. In Michigan, I will say there's two rules of thumb for spousal support. One is that if you're married for less than 4 or 5 years, it's typically not going to be a spousal support case. And if you're married for more than that, a good rule of thumb for duration is about a third of the length of marriage. So here's an example. And this is not, again, this isn't a formula. If you get divorced and you were married for 12 years, spousal support, if it's a spousal support case, would probably be around 4 years. Is a good jumping off point. It will be negotiated, it will be evaluated, but those are kind of the general rules. And unlike child support, there is no statutory formula.
Gotcha. That's interesting. So that would mean in that situation, the spouse who's requesting alimony could expect to get it for about 4 years,
Yes, yeah.
and then it
And then I would say if you're married for over 20 years, and especially if one person was a stay-at-home parent, that's when we might really look into what we call long-term spousal support. The idea of permanent spousal support is kind of going away, at least in Michigan. Um, but yeah, I mean the idea is that, and I have a lot of cases where there is no spousal support. Both parties waive it because either it's a short marriage or they make similar money or the facts don't align. Or we might come up with another part of their global financial settlement that basically takes care of spousal support.
gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. Um, and again, I had another question that was like a tapered on to the end of that one, but it's fading. It's been one of those, it's a weird morning. I haven't had my second cup of coffee. I think
No,
that's my
that's
issue.
okay.
So, well, let me ask you this instead. Obviously, everything has changed in the last since the 2000s, right? We really had the rise of the internet, the rise of social media, the dot-com bubble and everything else. And then we had the COVID era. We've got everything going to Zoom now. And so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on what's coming down the pipeline. What is different about this generation of family practice from previous generations? And what are the big trends coming down the pipeline? Where do you think AI is going to play a role in this? How are you putting your firm in a position to be able to be ready for what's coming
So
down the pipeline?
that's a great question. And I mean, again, I could spend 45 minutes opining on that. The first thing I would say is I'm 37, no judgment if you think I look 37 or not. But I would say if the core demographic of my clients are, let's say, 30 to 50, I have a theory about this next generation of people who will get divorced. A lot of people are in a position where they have less money than their parents, they have more debt, they grew up in the instant gratification and the instant generation. And I do not think these people, for the most part, have the time, the money, or the patience for a 14-month in court protracted divorce. I have really designed my practice to be flexible and nimble and provide people individualized advice and counsel about divorce and their options. I think, look, the very expensive, very litigious divorces will always have their place. But I've really positioned myself that if someone wants to work with me and someone wants my help, I am not a square peg in a round hole, and that I will come up with a way for us to work together that makes you as comfortable as possible in a very uncomfortable situation. And whether that is using AI but not relying upon it, whether that is having a completely different view of discovery, whether that is my level of communicativeness, um, I really try and strive to create my firm and business that truly serves people on almost a concierge level type of practice and attention and care and detail. And the other thing is that um, I very much have designed my practice where I don't have 50 clients because the people who come to me, what they expect of me and what I expect of myself to give to them, I cannot give to 50 people. And I would rather have 12 or 13 clients who I'm able to give everything they want and need than have 50 that I'm just running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
Give that quality of care to people that they need and that they.
And one thing I always say, and this is very much the businessman in me, um, I am a lawyer who believes the two most important things I do are business development and client service. And I think a lot of lawyers are either too ignorant or arrogant to think that. I am in the customer service business. It might not feel like I am compared to certain other jobs or industries, but at the end of the day, I am selling a service and I am selling something to a client and a person who's going through a tremendously difficult time. And while my job is to give them expertise and good counsel, my job is also to serve them well and make them feel comfortable and heard. And I think the lawyers who do not believe they are in the service business or the sales business, those are absolutely the lawyers who can and will be left behind.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Short, succinct, and to the point. I want to ask you about one more thing, and you kind of touched on this earlier a little bit, but I noticed that you do have a spot on your website for limited scope representation. It sounds like this is a pretty new development as of 2019. Can you just let my listeners know about what limited scope representation is, and how it can benefit a client that maybe can't afford a full retainer?
100%. And I do a lot of that. So, as I've kind of said and I've alluded to, if someone wants to work with me, I'll find a way to work with them. Years ago in the state of Michigan, the state bar decided people should be able to access basic legal advice, information, and help, even if they don't have five or $10,000 for a retainer. So this basically allowed for lawyers to offer limited scope or almost what I call hourly or a la carte services. And I actually do this quite a bit. For instance, perfect example. I had a woman recently, they were married for 13 months, they had no kids, they had no shared property, they were not terribly well off financially. Most people, I tell them they should have a lawyer do their divorce. I told her you could probably do this yourself. But she wanted to make sure she did everything right. So she booked me for 90 minutes of my time and we met via Zoom. And I basically walked her through the basics and helped her complete the paperwork. She is responsible for filing. I am not going to be her attorney of record. But for 1.5 hours, she got access to ask questions. Same things too. I have a lot of people where I call it more of like divorce consulting. And, I have people who are really on the fence, but they want to meet with me for an hour and kind of talk about things, but they're not ready to file.
Yeah.
And I provide an hour consultant strategy session on a limited scope basis. And that is basically we can meet, I can review things, I can talk to you, I can run circumstances and scenarios, we can game things out. There's no obligation obligation to you. There's no attorney-client. I mean, there's of course confidentiality, but it gives people a chance to kind of on a one-off basis or on their own term basis get advice and counsel without having to come up with a five or $10,000 retainer and have to do the whole shebang.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. Um, well, Max, let me say this right now. I really appreciated you giving me the time that you give me today.
Thank you
We've
for
already
having me,
talked about
Justin.
an hour, and so I want to be as respectful of your time as I can. So what I'm going to do here is probably I'll ask you my three closing questions here in a minute. I'll give them to you now so you can percolate on those.
Okay.
Question number one is, if I could give you a magic wand, and with that magic wand you could change something about your practice, what would you change and why? Number two is if you can go back in time and meet young Max and give him some advice, other than again the obvious, buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold it to 100K. What advice would you give yourself and why? And the number three is if I gave you a magic pen, and with this magic pen, you could change one law that's on the books. It could be a national law, local law, major sweeping ramifications. It could be in your wheelhouse. It could be getting rid of parking tickets. Whatever it is you would change, what law would you change and why? While you're percolating on that, we're going to jump back over and take a look at your site. Again, I am talking with Max Emmer of the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Emmer Law PLC. We will have a link down below in the description. He is a full service family law and limited scope representation lawyer working up in and around the Detroit, Michigan area. Having a good conversation with him. He sounds like he has a great head on his shoulders. And so if you are in that area and you need an attorney, please feel free to look him up. Again, his information will be down in the description below, but that's emmerlawplc.com, 248 859 0015. Our last sponsor, actually, we had two sponsors. We'll do this one really quickly. Anthropology.com. Gentlemen, if you're looking to take charge of your health and feel your best, listen up. Whether it's managing type 2 diabetes, boosting your testosterone levels, or just wanting to increase your overall longevity, Anthropology.com has got you covered. They deep dive into natural solutions from superfoods like spirulina and tart cherry extract to targeted fitness routines like high-intensity interval training that can help you reclaim your energy and your vitality. And Anthropology, it's all about practical, science-based advice tailored specifically for men who want to improve their health without all the fluff. Visit Anthropology.com to explore the latest insights on living healthier and a more vibrant life. That's Anthropology.com. And then rank with news. Is not being in the news regularly costing your firm or your company credibility or visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than science? Rank with News is the guaranteed way to get your law firm or business featured in major national publications, from Yahoo News to Bloomberg, Reuters, AP News, etc., and seeing those rankings sometimes in under 2 hours nationally and locally for words you want to be found for. This is basically SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or firm, visit rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national eight-figure traffic sites that can help launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com. All right, so I have a magic wand, Max, and I'm able to give you this magic wand. And with that magic wand, you can make a change to your firm. It'd be whatever change you want to make. Big change, little change. Now you've got 500 lawyers under you. Whatever you want to do. If you can make one change to your firm, what would it be?
Um, it wouldn't be a big change, but I'm very fortunate now that I have wonderful clients and people I work with and colleagues for the most part. I guess the only thing I would say is um, if I could have even fewer highly contentious cases or even fewer very difficult opposing counsels, that would be good. But other than that, I largely feel very humbled and privileged and grateful for the business and firm I have and the people I get to work with.
Very good. I'm sorry. The correct answer was all of my clients throw millions of dollars at me just because that's what they want to
Well,
do.
yeah,
But
I mean that would be great.
yeah,
Sure, that would be great. Or put me in their wills. But other than that, yeah, that's true.
but your answer is a good second place. That's
Yeah.
fine. So, okay. So question number two, we are able to go back in time. We meet young Max, and maybe this was about 4 years ago when you decided to go into this venture. Maybe it was earlier on, but you're able to give yourself some advice without breaking the space-time continuum. What advice would you give yourself earlier on in your career?
I would go to myself earlier on in my career in life, and say, lean in harder, earlier, and more often into your authentic self. I would say go all in on who you are, what your strengths are, what you like, what you don't like, who you don't like, And I think some people never get to that point in life. Some people it takes to their 50s, some people it takes to their 30s. I would say for me, I was on the younger side, but I would have told myself to just go all in for you because the people who are going to love you are going to love you. The people who are going to like you and respect you are going to like and respect you. The people who aren't anyway. So just go all in.
Fair enough. You can't have better advice than just be yourself. I mean, at the end of the day,
It
that's who
is
you
very trite, but I truly think it's the. I mean, yeah. I mean, I laugh because no
try to
one
be something that
knows
they're
that.
not too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
lean into
I
yourself.
always say I am unabashedly and probably problematically myself, for better or worse.
That sounds like advice for all of us, actually, or maybe a description of all of us. Okay, so question number three. I've got a magic pen here. Now, this one, free plug to my friend Doug Heenick, who runs DC Drug. He's a pharmacist. I always call him my drug dealer friend. But I don't know if this pen fell into a vat of chemicals or something, but it has a magical ability, and that ability is it can change laws. It can strike a law from the books, it can edit a law that's on the books, or add a new law to the books. If I were to give you this pen and it only has enough ink for one change, it's about out, what change would you make and why?
Can I do one in my practice and one generally?
We'll see. We'll see if the ink runs out. It depends.
All right. So in my practice, the one thing I would do, and this would be edit because I'm not smart enough to do this, I would find a way to change the child support laws, making it so reliant on overnights because I think it's really sad and tragic that the overnights of parenting time are weaponized for child support.
Mm.
That is what I say. And then my other quick one is I don't think elected officials should trade stocks. That's it.
Okay, I think we had enough ink for that second one. I'm okay with that one.
There we go. Quick and to the point.
I'm a libertarian at heart, so you know what? I'll roll with that one. Well, Max, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. I do always like to let my guests have the final words. Are there any last words of wisdom or parting advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
No, Justin, it was a pleasure. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for having me on. And I would say if there's anyone who needs family law services, in my area, and if I can be of help, terrific. But I always say if I can't help you, I will find someone who can. And I hope this was an entertaining and informative listen. And please continue to listen, Justin. And I'm happy to help anyone however I can.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that, Max. I really do appreciate it. This has been The Attorney Post. As always, I am your host, Justin West, and I've been chatting with Max Emmer of the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Emmer Law, up in Detroit, Michigan. As always, this podcast, though we do deal with a lot of legal issues, does not itself constitute legal advice. And if you find yourself needing legal advice, please seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the aspect of law that you need help with. Now, obviously, if you've got a family law issue and you're up and around the Detroit area, and just really quickly, you work in all of Michigan?
Not quite all, but the greater Detroit area, Tri-County area. I don't do, Michigan looks like a mitt. I don't do up north, but I do the greater Detroit area, yes.
Well,
And
if you're in the greater
if there
Detroit
are
area,
issues in Michigan, if I can't, I will help. I will help you find someone who can.
there you go. Well, I think if you're in the greater Detroit area and you need an attorney that specializes in family law, Max sounds like he would be a wonderful resource for you. So please feel free to, again, see his information down below. As far as the podcast goes, if you're watching us on or listening to us in any of the podcast repositories, leave us a rating, review us if they let you do that as well. If you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, share, leave a comment down below if you learned something in this podcast. But the number one thing you can do to help this podcast grow is simply this. If you know someone who would benefit from the knowledge in this particular episode, please share this podcast with them, whether it's the audio version or the video version, because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, I'm Justin. Thank you for listening and take care.